Now, I'd like to introduce Jay Matola. Jay is the Executive Director of the MGA, and Jay will say a few words about our first speaker this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jay Matola. All choked up.
Thank you, Jordan, and we're certainly pleased to be here at Glen Oaks, a great host for this year's Med Open and very supportive of local golf. Our first presentation today is on cybersecurity and as it relates to clubs. And certainly this is an issue that virtually every day in the newspapers we read about and hear about. You only have to look to our presidential campaign, to major internet outages over this past weekend. And certainly I think as we look at those things, the frequency of problems and issues, the severity of problems and issues, and I think just as important, the more sophisticated those that are enacting these problems are becoming literally every day. And I think it's one of these issues as a club leader, you have to address it, but what do we do? What's the right level of involvement? What's the right level of investment to make sure that our club data, that our operations are safe? And perhaps, I think most importantly, how do we make sure that we fulfill our fiduciary relationship with our members to make sure that their information is protected and it's safe? So again, an important problem, but one that's not easy for club officers and volunteer board members to deal with. And we're really delighted today that we have a couple of people that are going to help us address this issue. They have tremendous experience in the cybersecurity area. They come from, their main speaker comes from Oxford Solutions, which is a company that's based right here in Long Island. Extensive experience in specializing in advising their clients from Fortune 100 companies to small businesses and now even clubs on the issues of cybersecurity. And Lee Noriega, their Executive Vice President, is going to lead the discussion. He has more than 30 years experience in this area, and he really helps their clients develop, first of all, to analyze the problem, to evaluate it, come up with practical, pragmatic solutions that make sense based on the threats, the needs, and the outcomes that their clients would like to have. So I think it's a very timely and important topic. And we're also delighted that the Chief Security Officer at Baltusrol Golf Club, Mitch Fenton, is with us also to help with the presentation and to answer questions. Obviously, Baltusrol, a large, sophisticated club that takes these security risks very seriously and has a full-time staff person that's focusing on some of those issues. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Lee Noriega from Oxford Solutions.
Wow, good morning. So we're going to talk a little bit about the threat landscape and how it applies to golf courses today. Every company that we deal with is at risk, and we look at security as a risk to organizations and companies throughout the world. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, why are there so many cyber attacks happening today? Why is it in the news? Why do I hear about it all the time? And really it's about technology trending. We see the global population is growing. There's more people out there. There's more businesses out there. There's, you can see the most targeted industries from last year. We had manufacturing was at 12%, financial still our number one at 19%, information at 14%, healthcare, which you hear a lot about in the news, at 15%, retail at 11%, and entertainment and sports. So in the news, you don't hear a lot about golf courses being breached. What we were able to glean, there was a few courses out there that actually got breached or experienced wire fraud, which is another form of a cyber attack. We included a hotel in Montauk because a lot of the golf courses that we've come across also are hospitality units. They have either cottages or they're a full-blown hotel. So a lot of them fall in that same category. Same risks, same attacks, same type of opportunistic attacks coming towards these hotels and golf courses. So when we look at who are the cyber attackers, they really fall in a few categories. We've got foreign nation states, that's the ones you hear about from Russia, from China, from Korea, the United States. Could be considered a foreign nation state against other countries. We've got hacktivists. If anybody's heard of Anonymous on the news lately, Anonymous is a group that are hacking or doing cyber attacks based on a cause. So for example, earlier this year, Anonymous announced that they were going to go after ISIS and try to bring them down. But they've also tried to bring down Wall Street. So kind of sitting on the fence, is it right, is it wrong? But whatever the reason, they're doing it for a cause. And then we have the criminal element. We actually see organized crime on the move for cyber attacks, especially in countries like Ukraine. In South America, we see organized crime is actually going after soft targets. And what I mean by soft targets are targets that are opportunistic in nature. And then we have terrorist acts. And so ISIS has one of the largest cyber groups out there right now, hopefully for not much longer. But we do see a lot of terrorist units. They have adopted cyber as a form of cyber warfare or electronic warfare. So the vectors that we look at, we have a hard time seeing that. So we got the supply chain, we've got wireless access networks that people are getting into, and you can see all the different vectors that they have that they can get in there and attack with. So what's the exposure to a golf club? So your risk at a golf club, from what I've been able to ascertain in the last couple of years, is some golf courses maintain credit card information. Some do, some don't, some outsource it, but still, the fact that you do take credit cards is a risk to a golf club. Your membership information. When cyber attackers are going after information, it's not necessarily just social security numbers, it's not necessarily your healthcare information, but they're also looking for any piece that they can put together to start building a profile of what they're going after. Financial information, where they're always looking for financial information to see how they can intercede through wire fraud or wire transfer. And then club bank accounts, because a club bank account is just that, it's a bank account. And that's really one of the number one motivators for attackers is monetary gain. And then last but not least is your reputational and brand damage that can occur to a golf club if it was ever exposed that they were breached. Now the reason we don't hear about golf courses being breached too much is because nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to say that they received ransomware or they were duped into a wire fraud. So because we're not talking about it, we really don't know what the statistics are against golf clubs today. But the variables from an attack sector are your point of sale systems. There was a very large breach earlier this year that involved Oracle Micro, which was a large point of sale system. If you're using that, you might want to reach out to Oracle and see what the remediation is for that. But you have your point of sale systems in your restaurants, your lodging, your pro shop. Another variable is your employees. So we know through statistics that 1.8% of employees collude to steal, whether it be for monetary gain or for actual equipment or whatever it may be, but they're going to steal from you. And they may steal from you because they're disgruntled. Maybe they feel they're not getting paid enough. Maybe they got passed over for a promotion, but it still happens. But they do collude to steal. Your networks are also another viable entry point. Your wireless access, if you have an open wireless network in your golf club, it allows people who may not belong there to get into the network. IP cameras is another source to get into. Social media is being heavily attacked in the last couple of years, and we see a rise in social media attacks. So your golf course could be directly affected by somebody posting something on your social media sites. And then, of course, your local area network, which could be from an internal threat vector. And then the one that everybody forgets about is third-party vendors, your HVAC vendors, your technology vendors. Those, what we see is a rise lately in vendor due diligence. Everybody wants to do diligence to make sure that they're protecting their information, that they're taking the minimal or precautionary steps that they need to protect the data for their customers. Mitch, did you want to talk a little bit about physical security threats? Yeah. Did you want to address this slide?
Yeah. So when we talk about golf clubs, we come up here and talk about security and cybersecurity. We're dealing with private clubs and golf clubs. We're still dealing with people. So it really doesn't matter what business we're in, but we're dealing with a collection of really high net worth individuals. So the hardest part is trying to convince people that belong to private clubs that they're a target. I spend most of my time trying to convince a large group of people who have never been told no in their entire life that they can't do certain things. And one of the things we do is try to provide a service like Oxford Solutions. Too many of the club managers out there are trying to do it all, trying to talk about retaining membership and what their food value is, what the member value is, and a lot of these things just slip through the cracks. Some of the larger clubs employ somebody like me to attend to all those issues, but the vendor that you choose for your service is key. Coming up with a company like Oxford Solutions that can do this for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You can sleep well at night, especially now that we're putting all our member data on the net. All these companies that we have working for us to provide membership websites is putting their data out there for people to see. So Oxford Solutions is one of those companies that actually can provide a security service to protect you and your membership. It's amazing that in 2004 I was trying to convince these clubs, private clubs, when I first got into this sector of business, to do background checks. In 2004, the majority of golf clubs weren't providing background checks for their employees. They were just worried about putting warm bodies in a position. And nowadays, the millennials, all it takes is to screw up your system is getting access to your server. So a couple of things that I put up here on the slide was for you to bring back is to make sure that you're protecting your server. Just because you have a company that's protecting your net and the information that goes on net, if you get an employee that is minded to do harm to your business or to someone in your business or pissed off at you for how you treated them or how they perceive being treated, and they attack your server, all it takes is a small device to do some really serious damage. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Really, we talk about a system of lights, cameras, and locks. But everything now is cameras. So when I get called as a consultant to a club, they want security. The first thing you think of is cameras. Those cameras have got to be segregated from the rest of your system. So really segregating your servers and making sure that one system doesn't affect the others is something you should think about. Fire suppression. One of the things we talk about is where to put the server and how to protect the server and all these things that go online for IT protection. But then you have regular fire suppression in the place where the server sits. So if our fire system ever gets activated, all your information, all your servers are burnt, and you're looking at a lot of money. So trying to save you money is part of what I do and what we do. And really something to be considered is actually protecting physically what you're trying to protect with IT.
So I wanted to talk about a few myths. I've spoken to a lot of golf courses, and some of the responses I get when I speak to them, these are some of the things I hear. Myth number one, I'm a golf club, I'm not a target. So cyber attackers today, they really don't care as much about targets as they used to. It's really about opportunistic attacks. And when they come knocking at the front door, they don't know what's behind the door. They get in, they look around. Of course, they're looking for financial gain first. They're looking for information. Information ultimately leads to financial gain. And then if they can't find anything in your golf course, they're going to use you for something else. And it may be used as what we call a launch pad to go from one site to another, because part of their methodology is to hide their tracks. They don't want to be exposed. And they may use you for file storage. We've seen cases where attackers have attacked other entities, and then they brought it back to another organization, and they've stored the files that they stole from one company into another company without their knowledge. Cyber attacks are low risk and return high results. With these opportunistic attacks that are happening, it's only a few or 3 or 4 attacks that need to be successful. An attacker only has to be right once in order to get pretty good financial gain out of that. And then unmonitored and unorganized networks are easier because it's basically the front door's open. We can come in, look around, do what we want, and we're out of there. Basic security tools are no match for today's attacks, and that's true. 10 years ago, firewalls used to be the new shiny toy on the market, but firewalls, they have a place in security, but they have limited capabilities to today's advanced attacks. Number two, I always hear this, we don't store PII, or personal identifiable information. So your golf club may not, but the cyber hacker doesn't know that when they open the front door. When they come into your network, they don't know that you don't have PII or that you do have PII. They're going to get in, they're going to root around. Your club might be a third-party risk to other organizations. You may have cloud services that you actually use for your club. It could be in the form of a CRM or Salesforce or some typical cloud service. And because you have not protected your network, you may be a breach point into other networks. Again, your club may be used for nefarious purposes. It might be used for file storage, like I said, or it may be just used for as a launch pad to get in and go somewhere else. Or it may be used to launch an attack from. And it's not fun when the Secret Service or FBI come to your organization and give you a piece of white paper to tell you that you've got something nefarious coming from your organization. We talked about the launch pad, and then there's always information you can use. So a lot of the attackers, when they build a profile, when they're doing reconnaissance, it's like pieces of a puzzle. If they can get a name and an address, that's a starting point. And they can keep building that profile until they get a complete picture of who they want to attack. This one I hear all the time. We're good, we got a firewall. A firewall is just one aspect of security. We look at security, we call it a security onion. There's many layers to security, and you need those many layers in order to have defense in depth in order to protect your organization. So it's just one aspect of protecting it. A multi-layered approach is much better. If you're using a firewall, if you've got antivirus or endpoint protection, if you've got somebody monitoring your network, if you've got a framework that you're working to, all these different layers that complete that onion is going to make your organization just that much better. And all organizations, regardless of size, should be ready to prevent, detect, or respond to today's cyber attacks. Myth number 4, we don't have a budget for cybersecurity. It's too expensive. So even the smallest clubs can implement an enterprise-level protection on a budget. I'm a big evangelist for intelligent spending when it comes to security. I've met with a lot of CIOs and CTOs that have spent millions of dollars on applications and appliances to protect their organization, but don't have the means to either monitor it or to manage it or don't understand it, so they just throw their money out the window. I, on the other hand, prefer to taking a more layered approach, starting from the basic into more advanced. One of these is patch your software regularly. The reason software patches are developed is not because of new features and new shiny things and new functionality. It's because somebody found a backdoor into the software. There was a vulnerability. So software patches, they patch the vulnerabilities that are found that attackers use to exploit to get into networks. The second one, which we're kind of doing a little bit here today, is train your personnel or train people or evangelize it, because that's where you really get your most return for your money. In the last couple of years, social engineering, and that's a term that we use for psychological warfare from cyber attackers. They compel you or try to get you to do something that you typically wouldn't do, to perform an action that you typically wouldn't do, maybe wire fraud, sending money when you know you shouldn't, but you do it anyway because they build a compelling scenario. So training your people on little things like thinking about before they click on something, or when somebody calls them and starts asking for information that maybe you shouldn't give, but they do it anyway, and start going through those scenarios. And lastly, the biggest problem we see is you don't know what you don't know. You don't know if your network's been breached today. You don't know unless you have somebody like us come in and look to see if there's something in the network. So we look at monitoring behaviorals of what's going on in the network, not just active malware and attacks that are going on, but unusual behaviors in the network. Is somebody sending out data in the middle of the night? Is somebody trying to connect to a financial database that doesn't have rights to it? And all those things give you the information to make an informed business decision. You don't run your business without having all the information in front of you, so you can't do the same thing with your networks. Your networks, you have to have the information in front of you to make an informed business decision. So what happens if a golf club gets breached? Well, I don't think anybody in this room, if they have been breached, is going to say anything yet, but if it does happen, reputational damage, loss of existing and new membership could affect your golf club, especially if it hits the papers. Financial damage, there's going to be some damage from breach expenses, notifications, credit monitoring, and legal fees. I always tell everybody, don't pay for credit monitoring because eventually one of your healthcare providers is going to get breached and they're going to give it to you for free for a year anyway. Board reaction, removing or firing of key personnel so it looks like things are being done. Doesn't always mean that the person is responsible, but it gives a feeling to the members that they're taking action, that the board's doing something about it. The club may be passed over for key events, private, corporate benefits, or events, etc. And then hopefully it never gets to the stage, but lawsuits. Now the thing about lawsuits, we see a lot of lawyers getting involved in breach response, and the reason they're doing that is because the attorney-client privilege, and they don't have to dispel certain information. The problem with that, for us, it also slows down the investigation process. But lawsuits, think about where your risk lays to your club in the event of a breach, because there's going to be a lot of finger pointing if you're dealing with other vendors, if you're dealing with cloud providers. So if you have contracts or agreements with cloud providers or third-party vendors, take a look at the fine line and make sure that where your liability and risk lays so that you can mitigate it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, could you just talk a minute about authentication from an individual member perspective, and kind of how you, I mean, there's a lot of clubs that use the member number as the authentication methodology. What would you recommend, either single or dual authentication?
Well, I'm always going to recommend dual authentication, two-factor. It's just another added layer of security in that security onion that we just talked about. Education is becoming the forefront of cybersecurity in the last couple of years because of the number of social engineering attacks that are happening, the number of wire frauds have gone up exponentially, the number of ways that attackers are finding, hey, it's really easy just to call somebody and ask for the password than it is trying to brute force it. I can call somebody and build a compelling scenario, and they're going to give me all the information I want. And it just makes it that much easier. So education is huge as far as for your employees at the golf club. And I think it is also a way to let your members know that your club has been educated on security awareness and they're protecting the club's interests by being knowledgeable. Did that answer your question? Any other questions?
Right over there, Lee.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. I don't know whether Lee or Mitch from the standpoint of actually dealing with clubs, but to elaborate, employee training, how do we make the employees more aware of what they should be doing? Is there some form of training?
Yeah, there's security awareness training. Oxford actually provides security awareness training. There's other sites out there that do security awareness training. A lot of corporations and a lot of organizations do it internally. Usually their IT director will give it. What I found when it's done internally, especially the IT directors, they all complain to me because nobody listens to them. They don't take them seriously, and it's because they deal with them on a day-to-day basis. When it's an outside source that comes in and gives it, it's a very low cost, but it gives you the biggest return on investment, and it lends a little bit more credibility to the employees when they get it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Good. I think it's certainly an important topic, and I know that the question about employee training, and when we decided to do this topic, we brought in a number of clubs, and I think one thing that was encouraging that a number of clubs are doing pretty sophisticated training programs for their employees in these areas about vulnerability and just good common sense procedures internally at the club. And we're going to try to collect some of that information and disseminate it so the clubs that may want to adopt something will have a little roadmap to go with. Just a couple of other things. I think, as really has been pointed out here, you know, how much money do we spend on something like this? What are the right levels of security to have? We're going to work closely with Oxford to develop some things that may be applicable for clubs, and I think one of the things that they've very generously offered to do is anybody would like an evaluation of their internal security systems now, that they'd be happy to follow up and do that at no charge, and I think it would be a great service for our clubs to take advantage of. So you'll be hearing more from us about that in the future. We look forward to working not only with Oxford Solutions, but some of the other providers here, and also to develop some things that clubs can take advantage of here in trying to address a difficult topic. So thanks for your attention here. And now